evening. It is Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. It is 7 p.m. We are going to call to order the Ottawa City Commission regular meeting for November. We'll begin with roll call.
Mayor Kaler.
Present.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
Commissioner Graves.
Present.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
We'd like to welcome those that are in the audience today and those that may be watching through another electronic device or some other venue. We always welcome individuals to be a part of this meeting, and we begin every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by our invocation, which today will be led by Pastor Todd Miller of the Cherry Street Wesleyan Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Scott.
I think tonight we'll have our Director of Finance, Scott Bird, step up for the invocation. Thank you, Mr. Bird. We appreciate you stepping in.
Certainly. The Word of God says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not unto your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. So, Lord God, we come before you this evening, asking that you make our paths straight. Guide us in everything that we do for this community. May you be glorified in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. We appreciate that. That moves us on to consent agenda, which includes minutes from the October 4th, October 18th regular meeting, and October 9th and October 16th study sessions. It also includes approval of a new board member to our Ottawa Memorial Auditorium Advisory Board and the removal of public hearings for annexations for several locations here in the city. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, that moves us on to our regular agenda, which includes, as we always begin our meetings, with public comment, and that is a time in our meeting that we allow, and we actually encourage individuals from our community to come speak with us regarding matters with the city. So today, I'm wondering, do we have individuals who have registered to comment?
We do not.
Okay, well, we always know, please always know that if we're having a meeting that you are welcome to come forward and visit with us about something that's important to you. We'd like to hear from you. Declaration is the next item on our agenda. At this time, I'd like to give commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they may have had that would influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Commissioners? Seeing none, we will move forward to new business.
Recognition and presentation of retirement plaque to volunteer fireman Francis Dulcing.
I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to our fire chief, and he is going to tell us all about one of our great volunteers, Mr. Dulcing.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. It's truly an honor to be here tonight. This is something that I don't think has ever happened that I know of in the city of Ottawa. For people that don't know, we do have a volunteer force for the city fire department. Currently have 8 on the volunteer side of the fire department. Francis Dulcing, actually on longevity, is number 4 on the list through all of our employees at the fire department. Francis started with the fire department November 13th of 1994, serving beside full-time firefighters for 23 years. Our program requires our volunteers to put in 8 hours a month. Did some quick math, and that's over 2,200 hours of volunteer hours Francis has given the citizens of Ottawa and the Ottawa Fire Department over the last 23 years. Not only in Ottawa, Francis has donated that much time, but also he currently is Assistant Chief in Ohio Township Fire Department, which is in Princeton. He's been with them over 25 years and has done many other things in the community, not just here in Ottawa, but in Franklin County. When I look at volunteerism, that I see Francis Dulcing. He has shown through the years that we can depend on him. He's always there when we needed him. He was always there. And it was nice to have him around because we could depend on him. He's here tonight with his wife, Joyce. They just celebrated their 29th anniversary 3 days ago. So, but it's truly an honor to be up here to present this plaque. Mayor will present it, but it's been an honor to have Francis in the ranks at the fire department, and he'll be truly missed. And Francis, you know, the door's always open. Here's a plaque. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
We'd love for you to go right ahead.
Okay, sorry. In recognition of continuous service to the City of Ottawa, this plaque is presented to Francis Dulcing as a memento of the city's appreciation.
Yeah. Come over here and shake
Come
my
on.
hand. We'll look like I'm going to give it to you, so we'll be official. So but you have to look this way. Because well, you can look the other way, but it'll look silly. We'd like to get a picture of you and the whole commission if you'd like.
It's up to you, man.
Well, no. We'd love to get a picture with you. Please, take a seat. Scoot it nice. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
You know, as Francis is sitting down, I had the privilege of working with his wife, Joyce, for several years while my office was at the courthouse, and I remember one of the very first things that Joyce told me was that how important it was what Francis does volunteering for the fire department. So know that we appreciate it, but I know your wife truly appreciates it too, and we appreciate everything that you've done for the City of Ottawa and for volunteering for the fire department. So thank you for your service. We appreciate it. That moves us on to item 13 on the agenda.
A public hearing to consider the replacement of water line in the downtown area.
The condition of the water main along Main Street from the river south to 5th Street has deteriorated to the point of needing replacement. The project has been placed on the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund project priority list, and as a prerequisite to application for the loan, a public hearing must be held. So we will open that hearing. 7:08. We would like to hear from Dennis Tharp and David Bueller regarding this particular item.
Madam Mayor, Commissioners, before you begin, just for first steps, if you will, in a continuing effort to replace the water mains on both sides of Main Street from 5th to the river. As previously discussed, these pipes are aging infrastructure and have been particularly affected by acidic soil. We've had some breaks that have impacted some businesses, and they always happen in the most inopportune time. We'd like to proactively approach the replacement to ensure our downtown businesses are taken care of with water services, and they are disrupted at a minimum with unforeseen breaks.
Mr. Tharp, will you be presenting or not at this time? Okay. We would certainly, as a part of the public hearing, we would like to open it up to anybody in the public that may have questions about this particular issue and the replacement of the water main along Main Street from the river south to 5th Street. Does anybody have any comment that they would like to make or any questions they would like to make regarding this particular request?
Mr. Bueller, I do have a question. Will the entire length be opened up on both sides of Main Street?
It's our intention and by practice to not do such. We would do one side at a time, and our preference will be to have a minimum disruption, not the full length of one side at one time.
Okay.
Some of these, quite frankly, are unknown. Of course, we're in the initial stages. We don't have a contractor. Our preference would be to do one block at a time. That may not be practicable once we get a contractor on board, but certainly at a minimum length, not the full length on one side at a time.
And will we replace each drop to the meter, or how?
Yes, service drops to the meter will be replaced as well.
Okay.
There will be some sidewalk taken out for meter moves, and that will be part of the project for them to rehabilitate those pieces of sidewalk from seam to seam.
Okay.
And I had a question too, Dave, on this, the water lines, are they in the sidewalk or near the curb? Or
They are near the curb, and that's part of the other goal too, is this replacement will put it just outside of the outside lanes of traffic, which will put it further from the front doors and the basements of the businesses downtown, plus it will also facilitate any changes in traffic or widened sidewalks or anything in the future while keeping it accessible for repairs as needed.
And I think you answered my second question, because if we do some enhancements downtown, bringing the sidewalks closer in, go with 3 lanes,
Right.
this won't hinder
Not knowing
that.
what the future holds, this makes perfect sense while we're doing it to move it to the outside lanes. That would facilitate any number of occurrences that would happen or layouts downtown.
Very good, thank you.
And do you have an estimated timeline of when the project would start?
Well, that kind of depends on how quickly the paperwork gets through KDHE. Of course, we'd have to come back to you once we've got that loan approved and get your permission to go out for bid. Typically, bids are out for 30 to 60 days. Spring of 18 would be the earliest.
And then I guess would the businesses be without water for a certain length of time while this is being replaced?
Minimal, because they'll be feeding off the old lines until their services are brought over. They'll put in the new lines, chlorinate and disinfect those lines, and then do the tie-ins of the customer services, so it'll be just minimal.
And if I may, we're examining every option that we can possibly do. We've talked extensively already about evening work, night work, anything that we can do to minimize any disruption to business owners downtown. We can't do it without some interruption. We all know that. But we're looking at every avenue to minimize that as much as possible.
Of course, once we do have more finite plans in place, we'll be having door-to-door conversations with those businesses and keeping them appraised of where the process is going, keeping the project on task and keeping them aware of what disruptions they will have and what they might be.
Other questions? Is there anybody from the public that would have questions or concerns or would like to address anything regarding this in this public hearing? One last call. Anybody from the public who would like to come forward with any questions? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. And we will move on to item 17, or pardon me, wow, item 14 on the agenda.
A resolution authorizing application to Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, for replacement of water line from Nardisine River Bridge to 5th Street.
This resolution is for application to the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund through KDHE in the amount not to exceed $1.9 million, $1.95 million. Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
Madam Mayor, I'll make the motion, we make this loan approval, item number 14, and I also understand the rate was very favorable, if I understood from our study session, at 2.3?
Yes, the interest rate is very favorable.
Very good.
And I would remind, too, that this is a tie-in from the favorable bid we got on the raw water line. This leaves some money on the table that we didn't expend earlier, the rates will cover.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners?
And this may be a question for Mr. Byrd as well. Do I
Yes,
see him here? Okay. Do we foresee our present water rates to be able to cover the downtown project?
I believe we have some water increases in place, so the answer is yes. Of course,
Okay.
we'll continue to monitor that as we move forward, and part of that depends on what, part of those rates depend on what prices are doing in other ways.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions among commissioners? We will.
Might also mention this is also first steps. We're not obligated. This is just simply an application. So all this does is get in front of KDHE to get the loan.
Thank you. We will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Kayler?
And I vote yes, motion carries. That moves us on to item 15 on the agenda.
A public hearing for the purpose of considering condemnation of a mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln.
This public hearing has been called for the consideration of the condemnation of a single-family manufactured home located at 820 South Lincoln. City staff will present the details of this request for condemnation. I believe Mr. Sherman is available here and ready to discuss all of these properties, but we will begin with 820 South Lincoln.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Hello. I believe we have a brief PowerPoint to walk through. 820 Lincoln has a history of going back to 2014. It actually has been abandoned since 2012, but city staff began its approach to a resolution in 2014. One of the issues with this structure is that our own adopted zoning ordinance prohibits mobile homes within the city limits prior to 1976, and those are in relationship to the HUD standards. Before then, there was no consensus standard on the manufacturing of a mobile home. Many communities mirror what we have, so it's not out of bounds from where we're at. This mobile home is, we have the listing as a 1974 mobile home. It is in extremely dilapidated condition. Nothing was really done to it or addressing it over the last 3 years. The staff has contacted more than one owner. The present owner now wasn't the original owner in 12 and 14, but we have been talking to this owner since 2016. And such that it has been abandoned since 2012, that it loses its non-conforming status. So really there is no other alternative than to remove the mobile home from the site. There's not a present remedy to rehab it and follow the adopted statutes and standards that we go by as city staff. These are the findings that we use typically on all structures within the city of Ottawa. And as you can see from the photos, most of this is found to be still in a condition that as of this fall. See if I can. So this is July and then August. It pretty much, now we appreciate the lot being maintained to be mowed, but the rest of the structure remains still in pretty dilapidated condition. Nope, we'll just go back. I can take any questions at this time. It's a pretty straightforward resolution on staff's part for removal. If you had any questions, I'd be glad to.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Sherman?
I guess I have a question. So was the home illegal before the current owner purchased it?
I don't think so. As far as illegal, it had its non-conforming status basically revoked, but we didn't send anything out as a staff. Usually we don't respond until we hear from a neighbor. It's kind of a policy before I came on board that we didn't address these until we knew about it through a neighbor's complaint or some citizen within the community. And at that time, it looks like staff in 2012 began its first stop at the site. But in 2014 and 2015, it had exhausted its non-conforming status.
So any improvements to the home, if that were made by the owner, could that be done and bring it back to?
The second part of this issue is that there isn't a technical guideline through before 1976 to remediate or rehab a structure. I've pulled a couple building officials on the western side of the state that routinely deal with thousands of mobile homes, and they're in agreement that they do not apply renovations to mobile homes before 1976. And the thing to keep in mind about mobile homes is it is a pre-manufactured on a chassis. This isn't a site-built home, so it wasn't inspected by a professional inspector or a third party. And this was just manufactured at whatever manufacturing distribution center it was, making it even more of an issue to rehab. Much within these mobile homes aren't standard, and they're not up to life safety concerns that we find today. And that was really what was integral about the 76 HUD standards, that it provides some organized technical documents that we knew that needed to exist for these types of units.
Tell me about, Mr. Sherman, tell me about the conversation with the owner of this particular facility. The owner is just unwilling or unable to, at this time, address the issues.
Actually, Mr. Rosie did reach out to us earlier in the year about establishing temporary electrical, but that was at the time I informed him that we just can't do anything to it now because of both issues, the fact that it's a 1976, pre-1976 unit, and the fact that it's lost its conforming status as per our zoning ordinance. So it's kind of pretty much at that stage. I do know Mr. Rosie did talk to staff, the planning staff, about possibly moving this out and moving a new unit in, which it was after 76. We said, absolutely, be glad to help you with that. I know our staff planner worked out some of the setbacks, and it definitely meets the current setback standards. So moving in a new unit would be a positive sign, and we would be glad to work with the owner on that.
However, cost of condemnation of this particular item does come at some taxpayer expense, so we're certainly not cleaning up this lot and then giving it back to the owner at no cost.
No, Mayor. We definitely would send out our notice to give the owner so many days to pay for the cleanup. If not, then we're first in line with the tax roll to file, and citizens always get their money first on any sale or transaction with the lot.
Are taxes current with this particular?
I believe it was the last staff checked, yes.
Okay. Any additional questions, Commissioners?
Okay, thank you.
You know, I don't know that I officially opened this public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. 7:21. Let's open it up to anybody who may have questions regarding this particular structure. Come on up.
Madam Mayor, I'm Calvin Rosie. I'm the owner of the property, and I've got some material I'd like to have you preview real quickly. The first item is the contract in which that I purchased the home the second day of April 2015. I immediately, within the first week, had called the city to try to get electrical service to the building, and was told that that couldn't be done, that I had to go through the Building and Codes Administration to do that. And I said, well, that's fine, let's get that process started. And since then, the second set of letters is top of it says Gerald Powers. And I had hired Gerald to look at the codes and to find out where we were, because my stance from the very beginning in all this is that I bought it as an investment, and I would fix it up and remodel the property, which isn't extensive by any means. The roof isn't leaking, the foundation and the runners and everything else is in perfect shape. But matter of fact, on the second page, or on the first page of the page 1 of 4, on the top that says Gerald Power, these are emails that me and Jim and me and people of the department have gotten back and forth. And the first one I've highlighted there, it talks about it isn't the condition of the dwelling, it's the fact that it was built in 1974. We're having a problem. Gerald Powers, matter of fact, it's Wendy in her letter, the next to the last thing, gives definitions of a modular home and mobile home and a manufactured home. And the city keeps kind of interchanging those two definitions. On the second page, it talks about a manufactured home as designed as a structure in which construction in accordance to the General Manufactured Home Construction Safety Standard of HUD June 1576, which is where we get this language of the 1976. If you look down on the or forward, the bottom of the first page, it gives the definition of a mobile home, and it doesn't say anything about that HUD thing. It doesn't apply to mobile homes. It was applied to manufactured homes. And Wendy keeps turning that around and trying to make that sound like that applies here. Our stance is it doesn't, and I've always wanted to fix the home up. On the first page of the emails, I'll bring to your attention, or the second page, I'm sorry, that one of the first emails I've got, the bottom of that is highlighted. There is to be no activity at 820 South Lincoln as far as working on the mobile home. You know, you can work on the outside, but my hands were tied. I couldn't do anything on the inside of it. Some of the work was done before I bought it, but I couldn't get electricity there for one, so it's hard to do any work, but I'm particularly told I couldn't work on it. So it's not an issue of me not wanting or not being able to fix the property. The main issue is this, the zoning, that they're saying it has to fall on the 74. It has to be at least a 76, which we stand as not correct. The other problem with zoning that I need to hopefully bring you aware of is somewhere, there's mobile homes. The last page, you've got a colored sheet, and I took the liberty this afternoon of going back. I can't really tell, other than the 3 or 4 blocks right around the home, which is zoned manufactured and which is zoned mobile. But I made X marks where there's mobile homes, I made M where there's manufactured homes, and I made H's where there's actual stick-built homes. And in that 3-block area, I've tabulated here on the bottom, there's 35 mobile homes, there's 9 stick-built homes, and there's only 5 modular homes. But for whatever reason, the whole section is zoned for modular, which means those 35 homes are non-conforming just like mine. The other issue with a lot of those is on the definition in the modular home, if to somebody to rebuild one, it has to have a lot of at least 3,000 square feet. Most of these won't have that big a lot. I happen to have that big a lot because mine sits on a corner and it's actually 2 lots. So I'm lucky, I guess, and that's why I was kind of considering to moving the house that the city had purchased across Marshall Road, but then when we looked at that, the cost of doing that, because it didn't have a foundation, and it would have to be ripped apart and picked up by basically the wall studs, brought across, which they didn't know if they could bring across I-35 and a bunch of issues, and then basically rebuild. So the cost of doing that would probably be more than just rebuilding a house there. The other problem with rebuilding a house there is that I'm surrounded in it with a house with a bunch of mobile homes that are older, built for that area. That whole area is mobile homes. And I don't understand why that can't be fixed up and reissued like another mobile home. And I'm afraid that's all I've got.
Thank you for the information that you provided to us. City Attorney, do you want to weigh in on this?
I think that Mr. Sherman did a good job of explaining the situation. I'll try to provide a bit more clarification. It is, whenever there is something, a structure or a use on a property that does not fit with the zoning district, but when it existed prior to zoning, that's called a non-conforming use. And it's allowed to continue so long as the use is active. If that property were to be destroyed by fire or tornado, or if it were to be abandoned, then at that point the non-conforming use ends. And it's pretty long-held law in Kansas that cities and counties have a vested interest in eliminating non-conforming uses, and that it is appropriate for them to do so at those kinds of changes in status. So again, the property is destroyed by fire or casualty, or the use is abandoned for some period of time. Unfortunately, when Mr. Rosie bought this property, it had already been abandoned. The use had been abandoned for several years. The prior owner had not been active, and the utility records show that. So there were several years where property, the use had already been abandoned. Your code, adopted by prior commissions, is explicit that manufactured homes made prior to 1976, June 15th of that year was the first year that HUD certification started, are not permitted to be brought in to the city. I think the standard in the county is actually later in time than that. Theirs is a rolling period of time, so they're actually more restrictive than you are on that front. But you're not allowed to bring a home of that age into the city. And therefore, to have one within the city that is abandoned loses its protected non-conforming use status and is subject to having to be removed at that point. It can certainly be replaced with a newer model manufactured home for all the reasons that Mr. Sherman said about life safety codes. It can be updated. All of the other homes in the area on the map that Mr. Rosie showed you, if they are older than 76, they have either been continuously occupied or at such time as they are not, and that they are abandoned for a year, they would be subject to the same treatment as this property at 820 South Lincoln. So there's no double standard here. It's not that this property is being treated any differently. And unfortunately, what gets caught up in the distinction between manufactured and mobile home is under federal law, they don't recognize the distinction. They say manufactured home prior to 76 or post 76, and then there's laws on mobile homes and all that. The terms, unfortunately, are used fairly interchangeably between local, state, and federal law. But the date to remember is June 15, 1976. Whatever you call it, mobile or manufactured, it's simply not allowed in the city of Ottawa if made before 76. If it's already here and it continues to be operated, it's a non-conforming use that your law allows to continue until it's abandoned or until it's destroyed, and then it has to be updated to something that meets your code. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Well, the definition of abandonment, that is 1 year, is that what that is? And so we know that for sure. So is this real estate contract really is null and void? Or
I can't enter any legal opinion as to the status of Mr. Rosie's contract, but I think Mr. Sherman can, it was 2012 was the last time we had occupancy at the, and I think the contract is in 2015, almost 3 years later.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I checked, concerning that issue, I checked this morning with the utility department, and they said the last bill they showed of being occupied was July of 2014, which is why I showed the purchase date. I must have left it back at my desk, of April to the next year, giving plenty of time for that year. It hadn't expired yet. And my intentions were certainly to remodel the property and have somebody living in it. The other issue, again, we're bringing this 1974 into it, which pertains to manufactured homes. The city is the one that's making the differentiation between a mobile home and a manufactured home. And I for some reason, they've got two definitions, and Wendy is adamant that this one is a mobile home, and I agree. It has wheels under it. It has, it was brought in there as a mobile home. So from what I understand, the 74 doesn't matter. The other issue appraise good shape. Well, we've got the same problem with the house I remodeled. It was 1867. Didn't have any problem with that because there wasn't building codes. And it's got wood. It's got a metal structure under it. It's not rocket science. It's a house. It can be redone. Thanks again.
Anybody else who would like to address this matter in the public hearing of 820 South Lincoln?
I guess I will defer to council again. The mobile home and manufactured home, is there some issue with regard to the definition of each?
Commissioner, the federal government, and HUD specifically, doesn't recognize any such thing as a manufactured home prior to 1976. So you'll see that in the letter there that was sent out from Ms. Lee that our code says no manufactured home produced prior to June 15, 1976. technically, there's no such thing. They were all called mobile homes at that point. And so later on in the letter, she says, you know, under the manufactured home district, you can have manufactured homes produced after 76. I'm classifying this as a mobile home, which is a house on a chassis, rolling chassis. I think it's a little more than 36 feet in length. I think that's the definition that's provided there in the letter. So by nature of the federal definitions, it's a mobile home. It's not a manufactured home because under HUD rules, there were no manufactured homes prior to 1976. And therefore, it is appropriate to classify it as a mobile home under our code, and mobile homes are not allowed in the manufactured housing district in there. So under two ways, it wouldn't qualify. Specifically, and I disagree respectfully with Mr. Rosie, the date does matter. The date is the central issue here, and that is the city, for a long time now, has not allowed housing, whether you want to call it manufactured or mobile, built prior to the HUD guidelines to be brought into or renovated in the city if it's lost its non-conforming status. And you can ask Mr. Sherman about the date specifically that from which abandonment was calculated, but that is the legal analysis, and the date does matter. The definitions do matter simply because there's no such thing as a manufactured home made prior to that June 15, 76 date.
And I believe, Mr. Finch, that the city's guidelines are more lenient than even Franklin County guidelines are, as far as the age of manufactured home within the community.
Ms. Lee is here, but I think the county is something like 25 years from the current date. They don't allow anything older than 25 years or so from the current date.
Keep in consideration, that's if I was to bring it in.
Right.
It's already here. And my argument is it wasn't a year, and I didn't lose didn't lose the conforming. Everything over there is non-conforming because it's in the wrong zoning, which obviously changed since those houses were put there, which, again, my argument is that, how do you tell a person that's house burned down that they're going to have to mow the lot until they can sell it or give it away because they can't rebuild on it? It's too small.
Is this lot large enough to put a manufactured home on it?
Mine is, because it's a corner lot and it actually is two lots.
Okay.
But most of these aren't.
Right.
But my problem is feasibility of cost of putting in how much I can get out of a brand-new home in the middle of a mobile home district.
Okay.
That's called a manufactured home district, which isn't true because there's 7 times more mobile homes there than there is anything else.
And I have a question real quick. You had mentioned that it hadn't been abandoned, and I guess abandonment is over a year, right? But, even if it was from April or May 1st of 2015, nobody has lived in it since then, is that correct?
Well, and I bought it April of 15.
Right, but you haven't lived in it since then?
I was refused to fuse electricity and refused to even work on it.
Commissioner,
I was told I just had to get it off the property.
I'd recommend you inquire of Mr. Sherman about the dates that the city has used for calculating abandonment in this case. As you know, just because electricity may be on doesn't mean that there's someone occupying the dwelling, but Mr. Sherman can speak to the dates.
We had records and staff that in 2012, they were investigating the site as being abandoned, the former building inspector, and that is accurate to the utility department in June of 14, disconnected utilities, but that doesn't mean because you have utilities on and it still isn't abandoned. I could walk people through many houses in mobile homes in the community that are abandoned, but they still have the utilities held, the taxes are paid, they mow their lots. One doesn't seem to follow the other. But, we have from staff back in 12, and then before I came on in the middle of summer of 15, that it was not occupied. And clearly it wasn't. They referenced the fact that the water heater was laying open. The vegetation was still covering windows, but it still has been quite some time even. And I don't know about what happened before July of 15 on contact of rehabbing the structure, but it clearly was abandoned, and staff noted that previously.
Other questions for Mr. Sherman regarding this issue? I am going to actually call up Mrs. Lee at some point when she's ready or comfortable. Or Mrs. Lee, would you like to address it this matter? And Mrs. Lee has been here since before Mr. Sherman and was here. And so I'd like you to address some of the issues that we've been brought up.
Yes, I think City Attorney Finch described two non-conforming situations fairly clearly, and he's accurate in that the county actually used to have a similar standard to us, but then revised, and they do have a rolling date now. Part of the purpose for that is because these units prior to 76 weren't intended to be forever. They were intended and are taxed and are treated more like a vehicle than they are a structure that you would live in indefinitely and have the ability to renovate multiple times, which is quite different than, for example, a historical home built on a foundation with all the rest of that. And so that's part of it. The city didn't adopt zoning until 1972, if I recall my date right. And I don't know what this area was zoned then. It's not atypical for when we've adopted new zonings to place a classification on there. This is the classification that afforded the most typical thing for what the community thought that area would be, and that over time you would have the opportunity to create the zoning district the way you forecast the future to be, not just reflective of the past. And that's why, yes, in fact, if a structure was on a lot that is 50 by 50 and it had a house on it today, we have some abilities to work with that, but we have very clear examples of where properties have non-conforming situations or structures, and they've suffered some kind of natural disaster, what have you, and they aren't allowed to rebuild. That can affect what property sales are for, and when we are often contacted by folks that are doing appraisals and title research, they will ask us if it's a non-conforming property, and we often will give them a letter that indicates that if it is damaged or destroyed or abandoned, that it won't have the opportunity to be rebuilt, and they will note that, and in some cases not insure or not give the proper things for a bank note, as a matter of fact, because there's risk with those kinds of situations. Our records are that, yes, back in 2012, that the structure didn't appear to be occupied. I agree. We understood that, yes, there were some utility connections, but that it wasn't being occupied. I haven't really dug into that. That's the first time somebody's questioned that time period. And so we haven't really gone back and said, did the use go up or down in any of that time? It just appeared from all observances we had, and you know, frankly, there could have been some neighbor discussion as well. That's the first we've heard of that. So we don't have an opportunity tonight to answer that. If it's a concern, then we can do a little more research. But it was my determination, and I put that in writing some time back, that the non-conforming situation resulted in it being abandoned, and that we then could not allow the unit to be reoccupied. And there wasn't a challenge to that portion of it as far as the time period.
Okay. Other questions for Mrs. Lee? Thank you, Mrs. Lee. All right. Mr. Rosie, would you like to?
I'd like to address that also. When I purchased the property, I purchased it from a friend of mine that farms down by me, and he knew I did renovations and things like that. And the property was his folks, and the way he said it, a couple years or a year or so prior, they went to a nursing home and didn't know if he was coming back, or Mr. died. And Mrs. was still in the nursing home, and I assume she's still in the nursing home. And they had personal items in the house. I mean, it was ready for her to come back and live if she could. And then decided she wasn't going to, and then they sold it to me. So just because there wasn't anybody living there also doesn't mean the intentions were that they didn't plan to do that. And we can discuss or find out more information about Mr. Shively. Had the property, and I bought it from his son, I guess, Merle Newman. and we could talk to him about when the dates and stuff, because I'm not positive. I just got the information from the utility department, which would seem, I mean, you wouldn't typically pay utilities on a property if you didn't plan to live there or do something with it.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address this matter in the public hearing? All right, I don't believe there is. We are going to close the public hearing. Staff, do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss? No? No? We'll close that public hearing. Commissioners, we will move on to item 16 on the agenda.
A resolution to condemn an unsafe and dangerous mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln in the city of Ottawa, Kansas.
This resolution authorizes the governing board to declare a mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln to be safe or to be unsafe or dangerous, and to direct that structure to be removed and the accessory structures to be demolished. Commissioners, I will entertain a motion if there is one. I think we're going to die for lack of a motion.
Well, I guess for purposes of discussion, I move to adopt the resolution as indicated by item 16 of the agenda.
Is there a second? It appears as though there is not a second. So the motion dies for lack of a second? All right. City Commissioner Finch, where do we go from here? Just move on?
You promoted me unnecessarily. It's the city attorney.
Oh, what did I do?
Yeah. There we go. You'll move on to item 17. Excuse me. The next item is item 17. Is the public hearing, I think, on the property at 319 South Cedar.
All right, thank you. So, item 17 on the agenda.
A public hearing for the purpose of considering condemnation of a single-family structure located at 319 South Cedar.
A public hearing has been called for the consideration of the condemnation of a single-family structure located at 319 South Cedar. City staff will present the details for this request of condemnation. Mr. Sherman, 319 South Cedar.
Great. Thank you. This is another structure that has been unoccupied for a few years. The utilities have been off since 2014. This is not far, just down the street from City Hall here. The unusual thing about this structure, I did have the owner that purchased it had met with me and discussed renovation at one point on the site, and then some time went without any action. We sent out a follow-up notice. The owner contacted me again, had retained an architect here in town, and I met with them at the site to go over probably what would be the minimum standards to apply to bring this into habitability, and we discussed the construction code standards that we have on file, contractor licensing, what an owner can and can't do to their property. And this was almost a year and maybe 20 months ago about, and nothing's happened. I've had a call, I believe it sounds like it's somebody from behind complaining about the property, and that's what advanced this to come before you. There's been no action or contact from the owner to our office, to anyone in our office, and it's our opinion that that nothing's moving forward on this. It is substantially dilapidated. It's, if you can see it on the front, it's off the foundation in the front here. In fact, it goes all the way on the side. There's deflection in the frame and on the foundation. It's going to take quite a bit of work to bring this into habitability. So it's been a topic of our conversation since the owner has not contacted us, and we bring it before you for consideration tonight.
Okay, great. We will open that public hearing for the consideration of condemnation for 319 South Cedar. Is there anybody from the public who would like to address the the residents at 319 South Cedar. Come right ahead.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. My name is Will Salazar, and I am the owner of the property. I would like to pass I don't have a copy for everybody, but
Actually, is there somebody who can, Laura, it's like Laura.
I would like to start. My dad plays. But we have problems with the property. I know. And, but back in a building project we have, and I request that I can go back. To bring it up. You know, like if I do a little project, but if I install a bathroom, a bathroom, sink, I was just asking you to please have my utilities connected so I can start working that, and I'm planning to do it. And my dad. About 1997, and it was my 20 years. And I know I can.
Sir, I do have a question for you. What's your intention for the future use of the property?
My intention. switching.
But now that she's started down a different route, are you planning to live in the house yourself, or are you going to resell it, or?
We plan.
Do you have an estimated cost on all the repairs?
It's about 4.
So you've got either the cash or the financing arranged for that to happen? next March?
I do have the. At the end of this week, get the money, 43,000.
So you've been approved for a loan somewhere, is what you're saying?
It's in the. I have the paperwork if you want to see it.
But you have a loan commitment, actual commitment, or just an application pending?
It's been a.
And I'm sorry for not getting this from the, remind me of your name once again.
My name is.
This is, this letter from Doug Lloyd appears that it's a call from Jim Diker.
That was 2015, and I do have the contract with me.
Okay.
Mr. Salazar, did you say you had a general contractor, or you were going to act as a general contractor?
And just so I'm correct on your time frame, you said you wouldn't start till March?
March of 2000.
So after that, you'd be complete?
That's correct.
Okay.
Are there additional individuals who would like to be heard as a part of this public hearing? Seeing none, staff, do you want to?
Well, I definitely appreciate your questions, because I've never met Mr. Salazar or spoken to him before, and was not the person I met on the site with the architect. One thing I do want to bring up is that, as per our standard in our code, Mr. Salazar would not be allowed to work on that structure in any form unless he intends to occupy and live in it for 365 days. I also respectfully have an opinion that the structure is in much worse shape than described, and other professionals have looked at it with me and have agreed that there's quite a bit of structural work to do that is not technically feasible to just remodel and move in. The deflection that we see on the foundation is outside the limits of the normal structural calculations you find in the IRC that we have adopted. It has both deficiencies in the foundation and the floor framing. The wall framing has shifted and moved outside of its own portal framing. I can go on and on with the dry language, but there's quite a bit of work to take place. It's not my place to say that it's financially feasible, but it is not a simple remodel and go. And we also believe, and actually Doug Lloyd was with me, that we have some structural ridge problems too. Not being able to get in the attic, we're not entirely sure if the ridge beam is intact or not, or if it's still deflected past to where all the rafters have to be removed and replaced. And I'm not talking about the building systems, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But it is good to know that at least I have a little bit more sense on the ownership and the history now, because the folks I've been talking to were not addressing this the way that Mr. Salazar was talking about. So it's at least refreshing to hear that that's the timeline and occupancy. But we have not been contacted to have utilities turned on. No one's talked to me. No one's talked to our permit tech, our building inspector. I actually went around the office yesterday and today and polled everybody with these three projects to get timelines, and there's been no discussion on this property.
So that does bring me to the question that I would have. I mean, tell me about your contact with this particular, if you haven't had contact with the particular owner of the property, you've been contacting him via mail, certified mail, or how does that owner?
Excellent. Mostly when we're to this stage, we leave it to certified mail. If somebody wants to talk to us by the phone, absolutely, or email.
And probably in that letter, you've given opportunity there's a phone number in there, there's opportunities.
Actually,
probably.
the owner, Mr. I believe it's Deeker, that's the person I met. He has my business card. I've talked to them about meeting at the site. Doug Lloyd, the architect, knows who I am. We met physically together at the site, so those are how we've transpired some of the business.
And when was that, Jim?
That was the late spring, early summer of '16.
So, just for clear, who is the owner of this property?
Well, we still have
Owner of record.
BRS Real Estate, and the taxes are paid, but that's who we still have it, and we have to reference the county. But all our attempts to contact have come back unreceived. No one's taken claim of the property or contacted us. It's just literally been quiet, and that's one of the reasons why we move it forward, because when we do lack a contact person, neighborhoods complain, the building's clearly dilapidated, that's when we move it forward, when those three criteria usually come together.
So you're telling me that all your attempts that you have made to get a hold of the owner of record have come back undelivered?
Right, we have had, no one's contacted us.
Mr. Salazar, are you, what's the name of the entity that owns the real estate? Is it BRS Real Estate?
BRS Real Estate LLC, that's my company.
Okay.
I am the
And is your address P.O. Box 123 Gardner?
That's correct.
And is
I'm not sure if it's because it's P.O. Box, but, it just...
It's come back undeliverable?
Right, we just haven't had
Yeah.
any contact from anybody, so... Okay.
It's not court, but yeah.
Madam Mayor, I have a meet with the city. This is an inspection from the city that I give you. So this is not true that they never contact me. I met with the city inspector at my house. There's the day, and it's June 11, 2014. The city inspector found 4 items, and it's that piece of paper I give it to you. So since then,
Okay, I recognize that. However, that's 3.5 years ago.
yeah,
And tell me about your phone calls that you've made to community development, or maybe you have emails that you can provide to us that you've sent to community development, or you've probably contacted them in another way, or is that something?
I physically went to the city and request the paperwork, the application, the city permit, and everything to do this. And when I called the utilities company, they said that the city of Ottawa, I need to contact the city of Ottawa so they can connect in the water and the gas lines, so I can have an inspector, mechanical inspector, doing all of these and start working item by item and present to the city of Ottawa the inspection, so we can go by them for a contractor inspector that can do the inspections, and not me, but the inspector. But I can't get an inspector there because I cannot have the electricity and water.
Mr. Salazar, I have another question of you, too. On the estimate between 40 and 45,000 to bring this up to where it should be, does that, where did you get that information? Did a professional give you an estimate on this cost, or?
Yes, I have 2 beds. The main, the roof. Kitchen, everything will be remodeled.
And so you got these estimates yourself, you say, just by adding?
I have the paperwork for the roofing and through Home Depot, which is I work with them.
My concern is if you get in there and there's going to be something else, and there's always something else, it seems like, but I don't know how much experience do you have in this area of estimating costs?
I've been
I have a question for the planning and zoning department, if I can.
Jim or Wendy?
Either one of you would be fine. In order to get a building permit to do this type of renovation, what are the qualifications that the city requires for an individual to be able to get a building permit to do this extensive amount of work?
We offer 2 avenues to do the work. One is you can be an owner-occupant, or you can be a licensed contractor. To be a licensed contractor, you must possess either a pre-existing license that was issued in 2010, or you must pass the Kansas examination for Class C licensed contractors.
Okay.
Kansas statute provides through a nationally recognized testing agency, Prometric, ICC, Block, IAPMO, the list goes on.
Okay.
But those are the 2 venues, occupant or licensed contractor.
Okay. And Mr. Salazar, are you a licensed contractor to be? Okay. And so I guess that would affect your budget, your construction budget, to hire a licensed contractor to do the work.
Other wrap-up, Mr. Sherman?
It still is a little confusing. I wish I knew where the break is, but we've just not been contacted by our utility department to address the site, to connect it. Maybe this conversation is before my time, which is July 1st of 2015, but there's been no attempt to make an on-site visit by our staff or to meet anybody through our own utility department, whether it's water or electric, at the site. I just don't, I wish I could understand, wrap my head around where the gap lies, but just we haven't been involved.
Mr. Sherman, no,
Mr. Sherman, do we have some other pictures of the house?
There's more, I just didn't go through, but as you can see, the wall is bowed out and framed. This is not a minor fix. This is what we call the soffit line. It's actually deflecting inward, the foundation's pushing out. This continues all down the perimeter line of the foundation. We also have an old addition on the back. This area also is failing, which causes the roof line to be deficient. Just some of the back, you can see here, it's structurally it's in sad condition.
I'm familiar with this house. I've been all around it for a previous owner prior to 2012. And so I am familiar with the structure itself. If we would proceed, Ms. Lee, we've done this in the past, is to work with the owner to see if the property can be improved within a reasonable time.
Yeah, I think actually at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest question, in that, as with all condemnations, if you were to adopt the resolution, is you give so much time for it to begin. And typically, that's within 10 days, not 5 months. And then work has to progress, and typically that's within 30 to 60 days, and then we give an extension if work is progressing in that time. So I think the first question is whether waiting till March is sufficient, or whether you want to defer action on this tonight in order for a more detailed inspection to be had and conversation between Mr. Sherman and Mr. Salazar about the needs, so there's a clear list of what those things are and what those costs would be, so that they can make a decision, and you could go either way with that. But then if you decide to go ahead and act, what the time frame is in which you would expect work to begin and to be initially, ongoing in order to show to the community at large, which is part of with a question. It's not just about his property, it is about the neighboring properties and the community at large. That work is ongoing enough to expect it to be completed. And furthermore, you'll recall that we had a couple of structures where we acted and the owner believed that they had the ability to do the work and did not, and unfortunately they made an investment in a structure that then was wasted, and that's actually a lose-lose situation because we burned time and someone's money. So that's just there for you to have a little bit more conversation. If you want to just not act on it at this point in order for more research to be done by the owner and get in touch with us, that's a possibility as well.
In my tenure on the city commission, we actually have done that at least once, in which we have done that. If we were to condemn this particular process and just to simplify it in a different term, that doesn't mean tomorrow the structure is going down.
Oh, no.
But that means this is really fast-tracked, and we really mean it. This is no longer, this can't sit around for 3 more years. This can't sit around for 3 months if we set that timeline.
Right.
Is that correct?
These are, and as I see that, I'm just pulling up to make sure, yes. The way that your resolution is currently on the table for discussion, and you can amend parts of it should you so desire, is that work would need to begin within 10 days after publication, and work has to be completed and ongoing for 60 days. As I said, typically that 60 days is if it's been ongoing and there's substantial progress being made, we will extend the time. But that's when we do a real firm measure. If it were to start in the 10 days and then fail to continue after 10 days, then the city is once again unable to take action. Really, the point of a condemnation is to force the action versus the inaction over several years, which is oftentimes what gets items on your agenda to begin with. It is the fact that there's been no action other than when we communicate with somebody.
Commissioners, do you have questions for Mrs. Lee?
Just another question, Mr. Salazar. Is there a reason why you're wanting to wait until March to begin on this project?
Yes, I want to, if I can start tomorrow. But my wife is pregnant. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood, because I understood that there was going to be a rental property. Did? Yes, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
I am working on the assumption that we have heard from the neighborhood about this particular property.
We have heard from the members of the community. It's obviously a well-traveled street. It's a bit unfortunate when members of the community ask us to intervene and then unfortunately don't show up and carry that testimony to you. So that's yes, we've heard comments.
Commissioners, do you have additional questions, or is there anybody who would also like to address the commission regarding this particular residence at 319 South Cedar? Additional questions, Commissioners?
Like I said, personally feel if the gentleman's willing to risk his own money, who are we to say, no, it's not a good investment? It's kind of out of our realm of authorities. But at the same time, I know we have to meet codes. We have to have the right builders. We have to have the right people, licensed people doing the work as well. So I respect that part, too, of what we have to watch out for from a public safety standpoint.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Commissioner?
I recommend that we continue or close this public hearing once we have all the comments, but then at that time, we proceed with the resolution to start a timeline and have Mr. Salazar work with the planning department to determine whether or not to continue once they have a complete list of the items that are going to be needed.
I appreciate your suggestion. First, I wanted, Commissioners, is there other questions that you may have regarding this public hearing? And honestly, this is really to be heard from the public about this particular item. And I do appreciate Mrs. Lee's comment about that this is a well-traveled road in our community, and it's blighted. This is a blighted residence, and it's too bad. And I would be the first to say that, and I guess I'll say it here under the resolution, but is there anybody else who would like to address? All right, then we will close the public hearing. Next, we'll move on to item 18.
A resolution to condemn an unsafe and dangerous single-family structure located at 319 South Cedar in the city of Ottawa, Kansas.
This resolution authorizes the governing body to declare a single-family structure located at 319 South Cedar to be unsafe or dangerous, and to direct that such structure be demolished or repaired and made safe and secure. Is there a motion for this resolution?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move to adopt the resolution as described in item 18, and may I repeat what you said, to be demolished, repaired, and or to be made safe and secure.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Now it's time for discussion, Commissioners. I'm actually going to complete my comments. I will be the first to say that, and you will hear me say it time and time again, I do not like using taxpayer money to condemn structures. I don't think it's the taxpayer's responsibility to take care of structures that are owned by the public or by a public citizen. It is the owner of the structure. And I also don't like taking homes that may have worth in our community. However, I am concerned that this particular structure has been owned by this individual for over 3 years and nothing has been done. I am concerned that even though we did get paperwork, and for whatever that is, that was 1.5 years ago that this conversation's been had. Also, our staff is here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They are here to take your phone calls. They are here to help you. They are part of the citizen, or they're here to promote the citizenry and the goodwill of the community. I'm concerned that this conversation had to go this far, and I will be voting for condemnation.
And just one more comment, too. I appreciate what Commissioner Jorgensen said. It does include in the condemnation motion that it could be repaired and made safe and secure, and I agree with that, too. And I suppose this could be one last chance to give Mr. Salazar to do what he's told us he would do here tonight. And I know we're not under oath up here, but I understand with good faith that you'll be able to do this and accomplish this, and I would hope that you could.
Other discussion among commissioners? We will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries. That moves us on to item 19 on the agenda.
A public hearing for the purpose of considering condemnation of a single-family residence and accessory structures located at 635 South Mulberry.
This public hearing has been called for the consideration and the condemnation of a single-family structure and accessory structures located at 635 South Mulberry. City staff will present the details of this request for the condemnation. Mr. Sherman, you're back.
I'm back
We're so
again,
glad.
like a bad habit.
635 South Mulberry.
This structure actually, as you can see by the chronology of the very beginning, has gone back quite a long time with staff. I'm not really sure exactly the reasons why it comes in and out, but in the last 3 years, we've definitely decided to make it more of an urgency for us. The structure really is in poor condition. As you may have said earlier, we've always feel the same way as staff. We'd like to give everybody as long as possible. That seems to from our take, we've had neighbors complaining specifically about this house. And it would have come before you last year, but we were already fully into the structure that we had before us, so that it's come up this year. We have been in contact with the owner recently. Originally, the owner was hoping that we would take it down as the city, and I believe they would, over time, reimburse by paying off the tax rolls. But then we have received a demolition application by the owner. Unfortunately, they're not qualified as a demolition contractor, and staff has reached out to them to let them know that we could provide them with contractors that maybe can assist them in the process. Nothing has really moved from that point. That was just in the last week and a half. But if you can move forward, it does meet all of our findings that we use to the bullet points on why we bring this before you for consideration. And there's just some of the postings, the house. Yeah, we have some more of the foundation. It's not had any kind of really TLC or care given to it for quite some time.
Mr. Sherman, do you have current pictures? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, there's the latest. It really hasn't changed. It occasionally is mowed, but as you can see, the vegetation's overwhelming the site. I don't believe the owner is, at least from our contact, is looking to rehab it. They're looking to raise the structure and possibly go back with something in the future. But we still haven't, I don't know if I have, no, that's it.
Is there a basement, Jim?
It's crawl space, I believe. Kurt actually did most of the review on this for me. But it has quite a long history with staff, and then Wendy can ask anything before my time, but right now it's actively it either two phases, either we order it raised or the homeowner. It's just kind of up in the air right now which takes place.
When I saw the history went back that far on the thing, I thought I probably should address it. Frankly, this is an example of where we've been back and forth for a number of years with what is now the previous owner. And they would make a slight investment, for example, put a new roof on it. And then they painted it at one time. And they understood that it couldn't be occupied until the inside was made safe. But at least it wasn't a blight. And that's how it remained for obviously a decade or two. Okay, so there were investments made, but there was really never enough investments made for it to be occupiable. And so at some point, then I think it was in 14, we were called in by law enforcement because people were living there. There were no facilities inside. We were over there for several hours trying to resolve the situation. They finally were escorted away. There were a number of health conditions going on by that point. And I'm sorry, I didn't make a point to get that into the file. I just knew that we had a new owner who wanted to take it down. But just for the sake of when we get into these situations, everybody does their good faith to try and get it resolved, but sometimes it just perpetuates itself. And this happens to be one of those situations. And it's really unfortunate because when we began with the structure, it did not need to be at the place it is now. And had it ever sold at that time, we might have an occupiable structure that someone could be residing in at a very affordable rate. And I regret it, as the mayor has said, that we ever have to be in a situation of doing these things, but unfortunately we are, and it impacts the neighborhood. In this case, there were 2 structures across the street from each other.
I'm going to open the public hearing for the structure located at, the residence located at 635 South Mulberry. Is there individuals from the public who would like to address this particular residence at 635 South Mulberry? Anybody who would like to address this particular item? Okay, last call. All right, we will close that hearing. That will move us on to item 20.
A resolution to condemn an unsafe and dangerous single-family structure and accessory structures located at 635 South Mulberry in the city of Ottawa, Kansas.
This resolution authorizes the governing body to declare the single-family structure and accessory structures located at 635 South Mulberry to be unsafe and dangerous, and to direct such structure to be demolished or repaired and made safe and secure. Is there a motion on this particular resolution?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the resolution to condemn the structure at 635 South Mulberry.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote.
The city manager.
Or among our city manager.
I have a procedural question I'd like to ask Mr. Sherman. If I understood you right, Jim, the person you're working with says they want to privately have this taken down. You're in those discussions with them?
Right. It happened kind of back to back. They originally talked to us about a month or 2 ago about encouraging us to take it down, because we'd already sent out the June notice. Just in the last couple of weeks, I received a demolition application from the owner, and also a licensure application to be a demolition contractor. Unfortunately, they don't qualify. But in reply back, I let them know that we can provide them with our full list of folks locally that are in that profession licensed to help them resolve this, and they can decide whether they can work out a deal or not with that demolition contractor.
So if we pass this resolution tonight, how long do you think is reasonable to work with this owner? Because I personally think if we can get them to get that down and pay for it, the taxpayer is far better off.
Well, we're coming up into what I call the optimum demolition season. Winter is an off time for heavy equipment. Generally, you get the best bids and the best availability, so 30 to 60 days, it should be reasonable to hire and bring somebody aboard. Nope. Oh.
Except for that the resolution requires that they begin action within 10 days. If they get a permit, they're clear. They don't have to actually start the demolition, but they have to have obtained a permit and working on it. We don't just go right out. What we do then is we would seek a bid. If they get a permit or start working on it before we do, we're happy to see that happen. But the resolution as it is there calls for that. If they want to change those dates, they have the permission to do that. I mean, it's your resolution. But we don't know whether or not they will actually go to that. So if they get their contractor lined up, that's fine. We'd be happy to have them. It's just a question of whether both sides are bidding.
And as clarification, so you received the demo application, you received it last week, but you have contacted them, or you have not contacted them to tell them that that application's not?
Actually, this week we talked, and last week.
We come, sorry, Jim.
Actually, yeah, we've been in active conversation, so.
Okay. So they're aware that their
Absolutely.
demo application has been denied?
Right. And then the follow-up before the weekend, what last Friday was, that we definitely can help you with our list. We do this with everybody when we hand out lists and contacts. I even volunteer that I can call a few folks for them to let them know what they're looking at.
And I recognize that you've already said that once, but saying it again is important, just so that individuals hear that we're not saying, no.
Thank you.
We are still trying to work with individuals to try and make that happen.
Right, it's our goal always, even when we do have to unfortunately say the word no, to also provide alternate paths for them that they can consider, and that's one of them, is to help them find something that may fit their needs.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
It appears that this situation may be somewhat unique in that we've had conversations for demolition, so I would recommend that we, instead of saying a 10-day time period, we give them 30 days. We've already been through the process and invested the time and money so far, but to give them 30 days to do the demolition, pull the demolition permit themselves.
I'm wondering, can we amend that resolution if the resolution, or if the motion has already been made, or do we need to modify the resolution and then make a new motion with a modified resolution? City Attorney Finch.
With the leave of the, who was the movement?
Me.
Emily, or, sorry, Commissioner Graves.
Commissioner Graves could amend her motion if she wanted to, and if the second consents, then you'd be on the amended motion.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move to amend my motion to it's late to 30 days rather than 10 days for the owner to act on the structure.
Would you second
And
that,
I
Commissioner
second
Skidmore?
that emotion.
A song. Yes.
It is now.
Is there discussion? Hearing that the resolution has been modified.
There you go.
All joking aside, are there any questions or any other comments for commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Mayor Kayler?
And I vote yes, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, if I might.
Commissioner.
I want to say to the public, these words, and the planning and codes are saying they're not just words, they actually mean something. I too.
Thank you. That moves us on to item 21 on the agenda.
Agreement with Kansas Municipal Energy Agency for Buckeye Wind Farm Project.
Staff believes that this agreement is an opportunity for the enhancement of ongoing power supply for the needs of the city. Mr. Tharp will be addressing this matter, and we actually have a modified agreement. This is a different agreement that has different numbers in it versus the numbers that were presented to us on Monday. So I want the public to know, if they were looking at the study session agenda on Monday and saw this particular agreement or the conversation that we were having, it looks just a little bit different. The context, or generally everything is still the same, but the amount of energy that we are looking to take from this particular project is different, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, so Mr. Tharp.
So what you have before you is both a resolution and agreement to enter into agreement with Kansas Municipal Energy Agency for the City of Ottawa to take 8 megawatts of wind energy from the Buckeye Project in Ellis County, Kansas. We extensively talked about this in the study session on Monday. I think there are a number of really fine reasons. This is one of the best products that I have seen since I have been doing anything like this. The cost is as low as we have ever seen, and I believe that we are making a very fine decision moving this forward. It does a number of things for us. As most everyone knows, at least that's sitting here right now, renewable products are mostly an energy product. There is a little capacity involved in those, but with a product like this, I believe it takes us into the future a little bit. Not only does it help us with moving forward on taking one of our generation units out of service, but it also helps us as we move forward with Proximity Park, the industrial park that we are in the process of developing at this point in time. I would encourage you all to move forward with this and would entertain any questions that you have.
Commissioners, are there questions for Mr. Tharp regarding this particular wind farm project? in the agreement that is before us?
Mr. Thorpe, it appears that this is expanding our green energy supply for the community, and what all sources do we have for green energy?
Yeah, we currently have, like we have just discussed, this will be 8 megawatts of wind. Before this, we entered into agreement with Marshall Wind Farm in Marshall County, Kansas, for 2.5 megawatts of wind. We currently have our own solar array. That is not a huge amount of energy, but nonetheless, it's a beginning. We have a hydro product, and so our diversity at this point in time is just about as good as we can get it, quite honestly. We're a 40 megawatt community, peak demand 40 megawatt community at this point in time. Approximately 40% of what we do is renewable products. And like I say, I believe that is a very good mix.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move to approve the agreement purchasing 8 megawatts from the Buckeye Wind Farm as described in item 21 of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion among commissioners? I want to say that I recently went to the Kansas Municipal Energy Agency's conference, and one of the conference breakout sessions was about renewable energy, and I am excited about us moving forward on this, not only on wind, but about solar. This also does give, and I may have not heard you say this, but I certainly want the public to hear it, that we don't necessarily have to take all of this, and we have the ability to sell it back. Is that right? If we don't take it all, or how does that all work? We talked about that.
We get into a market discussion at that point in time, and I'm very happy to do that. It does get somewhat complicated.
Sure.
But to simplify that a little bit, everything that we take these days, all of our firm products, which is everything that we've just talked about, we sell back to the market. By having a product like this, we believe that we will consistently make money on this product. Average market price today tends to run in the $20 range someplace. So with a product like this, where we're talking really a top, in 15 years, we're talking about $14.80 for this product, to own this product. We believe that it will offset some of the other costs that we have for firm products. Now, always keep in mind that renewable products are a variable product. We agreed to 8 megawatts. We will probably, not very many days, see all 8 of those megawatts. We don't control the wind, we don't control the sun, but nonetheless, this product will help us offset some of our products that are somewhat more expensive. But it is absolutely necessary also to have those firm products.
Can you address the age of this particular wind farm?
This farm really has come about in the last 2 years. This is a 15-year contract, and as we talked about, that puts us in a very fine position to have less concerns about ongoing maintenance costs. Most wind turbines are rated for 20 to 25 years. We may renew this contract. I don't know what will happen in 15 years, but in 15 years, we would not expect to see a lot of failures in this wind farm.
Any other discussion among commissioners? We will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Thank you. That moves us on to item 22 on the agenda.
Resolution defining depository institutions.
This resolution updates the list of staff authorized to exercise financial duties associated with the banking needs of the City of Ottawa. Mr. Byrd will come forward and address this particular item on our agenda.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The resolution that you have before you is actually an update of a current resolution. There's just basically 2 sections here. The first section deals with the banks that the city can operate with, and that is all of the banks within the city limits of the city of Ottawa. That's the way it stands right now, and we would like for that to continue into the future. We are currently doing business with 3 banks directly at this point in time within the city. And one of those banks is a relationship with the health insurance accounts, the health savings accounts only. That's the only business that we're doing with them. But it also allows us to do business with the municipal investment pool with the state of Kansas. The second part of this resolution defines the persons who are authorized to do business on behalf of the city, and that includes the city manager, the director of finance, the city clerk, and the city treasurer by name. And so really that's what we're doing here, is updating those names, and that was brought to our attention by our very adroit city clerk, who noticed that this was behind the times and we needed to do this.
So we are not adding individuals?
Not adding individuals, it's just making sure that the correct persons are listed.
Mr. Byrd, is it correct that when you go out for bidding on CDs and those type of products, you make it available to any institution with brick and mortar within the community?
Yes, that is correct.
Plus the Kansas Municipal.
Plus the Municipal Investment Pool, that is right. And due to a variety of reasons, there's not a lot of involvement at this point in time, but times change, as you know, in the banking industry, and things will turn around, and there will be those times when they want to play with our investments. I don't mean to play in the negative term at all. They'll want to get into the game.
Yeah.
Commissioners, other questions of Mr. Byrd regarding this resolution?
Madam Mayor, I make the motion. We approve this resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. That moves us on to item 23 on the agenda, and Mr. Birch is going to stay up here to visit with us. He walked away a couple of steps. He's coming right back.
Resolution providing financing for purchase of radio communication system.
This resolution authorizes the Director of Finance to consummate a lease purchase agreement in the amount of $408,405.71 over 7 years for the acquisition of radios as a part of the P25 radio upgrade. Mr. Byrd.
You pretty well explained it. As you all know, the county has been working on a comprehensive upgrade to the radio systems throughout the county, and actually it is throughout the state of Kansas. The city's portion of that is, as you mentioned, a total amount of $446,833.10. The principal portion of that is $408,405.71. Interest portion is $38,427.39. The actual interest rate on this is 2.3% over 7 years. A very good bid. What this action does is give me the permission to move forward with the lease arrangements with the bank that we're dealing with, that is U.S. Bank Corp. I would ask for this to be an affirmative vote so I can finalize this over the next couple of days.
Yeah, Mr. Byrd, it's correct that the county opened this up for bid to banks, and U.S. Bank was a low bidder for the financing of that.
That is correct, yes. They opened that up for all of the entities within Franklin County that is participating in this action.
And along with that, Mr. Byrd, this is not a flippant decision. We've been talking and thinking about this for
months.
Quite a few months. So it's just that everybody knows that, and it is in partnership with the county that they agreed to do this, and we're just kind of following their footsteps.
And again, a very good rate. We're pleased to be doing business. I've been pleased to work with these folks, and look forward to finishing this deal.
If for some reason we decide, you know what, we don't want to do this, we're not going to move forward on this, do we have a way to communicate?
I think the two chiefs would argue that better than I could, but from what I understand, they are having some difficulties with communications. at times, and I really don't want to go into that in much detail because I'm not the expert there.
And I recognize that. I'm sorry I put you on the spot there. It's just that I want the citizen to know, and this is a tremendous amount of money that we're spending on this particular item, but it is critical to the public safety of our citizens.
It is.
And so it's not something that we do lightly, because, I mean, it's close to $500,000. And it's not something we do lightly. But it is critical to the safety of our citizens.
You are absolutely right. It is not something that we take lightly. We never take going out for $500,000 or $100 lightly. It is the citizens' money that we are spending, but it is also in the best interest of our citizens that our fire department, our police department, the county sheriff's department, everyone involved has the best communications possible.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the resolution that is listed on item 23?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner,
I move that we approve the item listed on 23 on our agenda.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the resolution to provide financing for the purchasing of the radio communication system? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Mayor Kayler?
And I vote yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That moves us on to item 24 on the agenda.
Request for approval of resolution declaring an interest in and establishing a public hearing for consideration of annexation of land at 426 and 436 Beach.
This resolution cancels the public hearing on the matter scheduled for November 1st, 2017, and sets a new hearing for January 3rd, 2018. Mrs. Lee, would you like to, I know it's a brief conversation that you're going to have with us on these next three items, but would you like to address this for us, please?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I just thought we didn't do this before, but it might be helpful for the public to know which parcels. So this very first one, whoa. These two tracks over here on the west side of town, it's very difficult to see this image, I'm sorry about that, but this is Beach Street. This is 268, the connection between 68. So this is going around the western edge of the community. And so these are two parcels that are remnants of parcels that abut Beach Street. These, the annexation hearings that we have put back on the agenda were improperly noticed for timing, and so we're asking that they be rescheduled with a new adoption of resolution so that these hearings would be held January 3rd at your first meeting in January, where at such time the property owners and others could come and be heard.
So we'll see this slideshow at that time.
Yeah, we'll do more of one that tells you all the details. We had to file with you back when we originally adopted this in September, the documents that indicate why, under the statute, that properties that are generally, our general rule of thumb on all three of these is that they are largely surrounded by the existing city limits now, and that they can create confusion then by citizens or visitors as to who's going to respond in the case of an emergency, or who is it that they need to contact for various things.
Okay.
Commissioners, is there a motion for item number 24 on the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion. I assume we have to do each of these separately.
Yes, sir.
I'll make the motion on item 24.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, item 25 on the agenda.
Request for approval of resolution declaring an interest in and establishing a public hearing for consideration of annexation of land at 241 North Cherry.
This resolution cancels the public hearing on the matter scheduled for November 1st, 2017, and sets the new hearing for January 3rd, 2018.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner,
I move to approve the resolution as described in item 25 of the agenda.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? If not, we will proceed to vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 26 on the agenda.
Request for approval of resolution declaring an interest in and establishing a public hearing for consideration of annexation of land at 2324 East Logan.
This resolution cancels the public hearing on this matter scheduled for today, November 1st, 2017, and sets a new hearing for January 3rd, 2018. Is there any discussion among commissioners or any questions for Mrs. Lee or anything you want to discuss at all? Because it's 10 to 9.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
this is a similar to the previous two motions, so I move to approve the request as described in item 26 of the agenda.
So there is a motion on the floor to approve the resolution for a public hearing for January 3rd, 2018 for 2324 East Logan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, that moves us on to reports by the mayor. I might just want to say that when we get closer to the witching hour, we move so much quicker. So, no pressure, City Manager Neinstead. If you're going to give us a homily.
Well, I have a coffee cup up in my office, and it says on one side, it is what it is, and on the other side, it is what it is. But I have
82 items that you're going to discuss.
I have three things for you. First thing is that before our next city commission meeting, or morning meeting, we will celebrate Veterans Day in the community on November 11th. And that is when World War I ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And this community celebrates Armistice Day. We have a flag display in City Park. We have a parade. It's nice to see that we still have a parade on Veterans Day. So I would encourage all of our citizens to understand about Veterans Day, do the research about World War I, about the importance of World War I, and how 100 years later there are many conflicts in the world that we are dealing with because of World War I and some of the decisions that were made after that war. Life is not simple and the world is not simple. So November 11th, the community has a great opportunity to honor all veterans that have served in wartime and peacetime. And so please participate. And we will be closed on November 10th. That will be in observance of November 11th. So two other things. In the last week, we lost a good friend, Gene Ramsey, who served on this commission a long time. But more importantly, Gene served this community. And Gene served this community with all of his heart. And Gene was on the commission, as was Blake, Commissioner Jurgensen, sorry, that honored me by bringing me to Ottawa 10 years ago. And Gene and his wife became very close friends of my wife and I, and really helped to bring us into this community. And Gene put his arm around not only me, but a lot of other people a lot of times, and was just there. And I would also speak to, we lost another long-term member of this community, Sue Martin, in the last couple of days. And Sue was a human resource director at Ransom Hospital. And while I did not know Sue to the extent that I knew Gene, The nexus between the two is that they believed and they were loyal and they promoted the organizations they were associated with. Gene believed in this city, believed in the future of this city. And I was honored to be here through a lot of those decisions that this governing body has made about the future of this city. And Sue Martin lived Ransom Memorial Hospital and was there for, I believe, 40 years in some capacity. And I believe was a graduate of OU and was a classmate of Dennis Tharp. So we have a lot of good people in the community. We have a lot of leaders in the community that we lose. But let's keep these families in our thoughts and prayers. And I just say thank you to my good friend Gene Ramsey for a lot of good things that he did for all of us.
That moves us on to, thank you, City Manager Nystad. We appreciate those words. That moves us on to reports by City Commissioners. City Commissioner Crowley.
I have none.
City Commissioner Jorgensen.
I'd just like to echo, I'm not going to take very long, Mayor. I'd just like to echo some of the statements that our city manager said about Gene Ramsey. And I'd just like to remind folks that the new US 59 divided highway between Ottawa and Lawrence was largely due to the lobbying effort that Gene and others had done during the 90s to make that stretch of road a safer route. His sage leadership has really helped the community to be a better place through his service on the city commission. So his passing is a great loss for our community. I'd also like to say that the city manager did not mention this, but he did challenge the city commissioners that can grow beards to grow beards during the month of November, and in exchange for our whiskers, he has agreed to make donations to the Franklin County Cancer Franklin County Cancer
Foundation.
Make a donation to them in each case. So I will be getting a little bit more scruffy again here this November, and so please bear with me. Well, I look more like a bum than I do as a commissioner. So.
Commissioner Skidmore.
I accept the challenge, Richard, so I'll be trying that as well. So yes, scruffiness and less kissing at home, but things you have to sacrifice, we'll do. So for that,
I cannot help you with that.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand. I have nothing else.
Mr. Graves, you cannot win. You cannot win after that. I just want you to know I've got your back here.
No report.
No report. Okay.
No.
That moves us on to a report by the mayor. Number one, I do want to point out that Election Day is less than a week away. And we are voting for key spots here in the City Commission. In fact, 4 of the spots here sitting at this table will be up for re-election, and I know that nobody else wanted to bring it up, but I'll bring it up because I'm not up for re-election, and it is important that you get out and vote. This is the first time that we have voted in November for City Commission and for School Board, and it is critical that you get out and vote. You can vote tomorrow, you can vote the next day, but please do not forget to vote on the 7th if you've not done so. Critical that you vote on the 7th. I also do want to point out that I wore my Girl Scout outfit today because I am still celebrating the birthday of the founder of Girl Scouts, which is actually it happens on Halloween. So Juliet Gordon-Lowe certainly pushed us forward and pushed women forward to give us service. So hence me wearing my Girl Scout green tonight. Number 3, I want to add on to the Veterans Day holiday celebration. There will be a flag retirement ceremony at 4:30 at Forest Park, where Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts will be working together to do flag retirement. If you know of a flag that needs to be retired, you can certainly, I would believe that you could probably bring it to I'm just going to say you could bring it to City Hall and they'll get it to me and we will make sure it's properly retired. We want to make sure that those are done appropriately, but we invite the public to be a part of that 4:30 on Saturday the 11th at Forest Park. And lastly, I do want to discuss Gene Ramsey, and I posted a post that I just want to read on my Facebook page, my mayor Facebook page, and want to read that because that really tells you a little bit about my relationship with Gene. And it says, when somebody patiently sits with you while you learn the rules of being a public servant, that person is always a part of you. Gene Ramsey was a mentor to me. He and his beautiful wife, Ann, sat in the pew behind us in church as my children were small. He spent countless hours explaining to me the intricacies of public service. I can't tell you how many times Gene might have said to me, you need to talk to somebody about LAVTR, or LAVTR, is that right? Okay, Gene would be happy that I got that right. LAVTR, what's going to happen with LAVTR? I still don't completely understood it, but Gene would bring it up to me all the time. And the budget. He went through the budget with me line by line several times. I am a better person because I knew Gene Ramsey. I saw Gene just a little bit, 2 weeks ago. I saw him in his hospital room. He couldn't speak at that time, but he immediately reached for my hand, and I will be forever grateful for that moment and every moment that I spent with Gene Ramsey. So thank you to Gene for giving his time of service, and thank you to Ann for lending Gene to the City of Ottawa for all the time that she did. And I promised her that next year when budget season rolled around that I would bring her a cherry limeade as Gene did every single year at the end of budget season when the budget was passed, and I will. So next year, Ann and I will be sharing a Sonic cherry limeade at her house in Gene's honor. So thank you, Gene, for your service. That brings us to announcements. Study session on November 6th at 4 p.m. at City Hall. Election Day is November 7th. Veterans Day, as our city manager indicated, city offices will be closed and we will be observing Veterans Day on the 10th. And on the 15th, we will have our regular meeting at 9:30 a.m. If there's nothing else to be brought in front of us, we will adjourn until our study session on November 6th at 4 p.m.